Welcome to your RMLS orientation. My name is Jeremy and I'm your subscriber relations representative. This is the only required class we have at RMLS, and as such, we are going to monitor your attentiveness. Please make sure that the browser that you're using to watch this webinar is the primary active browser on your computer. We also want you to participate. As we go through this orientation, you'll see quiz questions pop up in the sidebar. You need to respond to these questions in order to receive credit for attending this required class. And finally, if you have any questions, please use the chat function, and a trainer such as myself will reach out to you as soon as possible. Now, before we begin, it is important to understand that while we are an association-owned MLS, there is a difference between what your association provides and what RMLS provides. Your association provides your guidance as far as ethical standards. They're also going to provide advocacy at the local, state, and federal levels to ensure that any legislation that's passed in relation to the real estate industry is equitable. They're also going to provide the education and training in relation to those legal and ethical issues. But we're here to talk about RMLS. And we have a number of topics that we're going to cover today, including what and who make up RMLS. We're also going to give an overview of the rules and regulations that determine how we operate. We're going to go on a tour of RMLS Web. And finally, we're going to cover the very basics of SentriLock. So what is RMLS? We are the Regional Multiple Listing Service. And as such, we have 4 primary responsibilities. Number 1 being to house and maintain current and historic listing data. Secondary is to ensure cooperation between brokerages, as well as protect agency relationships between a buyer's agent and their client, and a listing agent and their client. You'll notice as we go through the rules and regulations overview how many of our rules and regulations are directly related to these 2 responsibilities. Thirdly, we are your source and access to SentriLock lockbox sales and support. And finally, we provide support and training resources for all the tools that you have access to through RMLS Web or any of our third-party apps. We're governed by our board of directors. This is a 17-member board of volunteer, active industry leaders. These are agents who are passionate about the direction that the industry is going. They're assisted by our committees, such as our rules, our hearings, our forms, and our technology committees. These are also staffed by volunteer, active agents. The chairperson of each of these committees is also a full board member. At RMLS, we have over 50 employees, including our programmers and our IT staff. RMLS Web is a website that we built, maintain, and are proud of. We have our training and help desk staff, such as myself, who provide support in whatever way we can. We have our data accuracy team, which ensures that the listing data that we house and maintain is accurate, and they do so using our rules and regulations. Our front desk staff you may have already interacted with in submitting your initial paperwork. They're here to offer support in membership or lockbox. We have our billing and communications department, which provides our billing support and newsletter information to our subscribers. We have 11 locations that cover our primary coverage area, including 10 of them in the state of Oregon and 1 across the river in Vancouver. At any of these locations, you can find support for your lockboxes, for your membership, or using any of our products. As I mentioned, we are an association-owned MLS, and our primary shareholders are the Portland Metro, the East Metro, and the Clark County Association of Realtors. However, our primary coverage area includes a much larger section of Oregon and Southwest Washington. To assure that our subscribers in these areas receive equitable treatment, we have our Service Area Advisory Committee, the chair of which is also a full board member. Next, we have our supplementary coverage area. These are the areas where we are not the primary MLS. There's another MLS in this area that is primary. However, many agents in this area belong to both. And finally, we have our ancillary coverage area. These are the areas where we have very few listings. However, we do have access to all the tax records in these areas. As a new subscriber, you've just paid your first batch of dues, and moving forward, dues are billed quarterly at $141, with SentryLock as an option at $33 billed on the same invoice. You have the option of paying your dues annually, which will earn you a 10% discount on the RMLS dues only. You can also easily sign up for autopay by calling or emailing the front desk. Our billing cycle begins on the first day of the last month of the quarter. The invoice is sent out and due by the 26th of that same month. If that invoice is not paid within 10 days, suspension of access to RMLS Web will be activated. If this happens, it's easy to reactivate. You simply need to call us and make payment arrangements, and we can activate your service immediately. Let's begin our review of the rules and regulations and how they help us assure our data accuracy. The rules and regulation document can be found on RMLS Web, and when we give our tour of RMLS Web, I'll show you where to find it. I'll also demonstrate how to use the Control F function to search this lengthy document. Now, this is also a living document, so while you are more than welcome to download this document to your computer or have it printed and put on display in your office, we do recommend referencing the online version when looking for information, because it is updated throughout the year, and you want to be sure to be referencing the most current rules and regulations. Now, let's review some of the most pertinent information to the industry. And let's start out by looking at the 24-hour rule. Now, there is no actual specific 24-hour rule. However, there are a number of rules that reference this text right here, specifically that within 24 hours after all signatures have been obtained. The good rule of thumb at RMLS is if your client signed something, that probably started a clock, and that clock at RMLS is always set to 24 hours. Whether it's for data loading, uploading the Office exclusive addendum, uploading the photograph omission form, listing input deadline, making listing changes, accepted offers, a sale fail, or uploading the uncooperative tenant form, you have 24 hours after all signatures have been obtained. Next, we have Rule 3.12, which is talking about the responsibility for accuracy of information. And specifically, who exactly is responsible for the accuracy of the information in a listing? The short answer is, you, the listing agent, are responsible. When entering a listing to RMLS Web, you are representing that you are going to submit accurate listing data. RMLS does not verify the information that's provided to us. We do, however, reserve the right to remove listings or portions of listings that we find are obvious violations of our rules and regulations. The important thing to remember with this rule is to do your due diligence. Make sure that the information that you're entering into the system that we're allowing out to the cooperative, that is going out to the public, is correct and accurate. Next, we have Rule 3.27, which is all about the availability for showings. While this is a very small rule, it's a very important rule, and that is that all active listings must be made available immediately for showings. If a listing is published on a Wednesday, it must be available on Wednesday. You can't publish a listing on Wednesday and say no showings until Friday, or showings start on Friday. When a listing is entered as active status, it must be made available immediately. Unless the uncooperative tenant unavailable for showings form has been filled out. Once your client signs this form, you simply need to include in the private remarks that this is unavailable for showings, tenant will not grant access to the property, and then within 24 hours, submit the form to RMLS. Next, we have Rule 3.25, which is talking about personal promotion in public remarks and photos. And more specifically, that personal promotion and contact information in public remarks and photos is prohibited on RMLS Web. This includes photos, video tours, virtual tours, or all public remarks. None of these may include any contact information of the listing agent. They may also not contain any personal branding of the listing agent. This is part of our way of our responsibility of maintaining that agency relationship between a buyer's agent and their client. If, as a listing agent, you have branded marketing materials that you want to include, you can upload them to the private remarks and give that buyer's agent the choice as to whether they want to share that branded marketing with their clients. The important thing to remember with this is these are reviewed upon both publish or edit of a listing. We are going to review the photos, video tours, and virtual tours for any personal promotion. Next, we have Rule 10.3 about the authority to publish. When a listing is entered into RMLS, as the listing agent, you are representing that you have the authority to license the listing content. This includes any photos, images, graphics, audio, video, drawings, or descriptions. You are authorized to license this information. Maybe it's photos that you've had taken. Maybe it's photos that you had a photographer take, or you had your homeowner pay a photographer take. That is fantastic. Just understand that you are representing that you have the authority to license this information. If you've been given approval by another agent to use the marketing materials that they've had created and they're giving you the approval to use them, make sure that they actually have that approval. Some photographers retain copyright ownership of their photos and only license them for that specific listing. The same thing can apply to architectural drawings. The main thing to remember with this rule is know who owns your marketing materials. Moving on to Rule 3.29 is getting into the coming soon, no showing listing status. Coming soon, no showing listing status is a valuable source for a listing agent to pre-market a property that is not ready to be marketed to the general public. Coming soon, no showing listings may be used for 21 days or less, and while in this status, they may not be shown at any time by anyone for any reason. Coming soon, no showing listings may also not be marketed to the general public. So what can we do with coming soon, no showing listings? CSN listings may have a sign and a flyer at the property with a rider that says coming soon. Also notice that it says at the property and not in the property. You don't want to have flyers inside a property that no one should be inside of. CSN listings also only live on RMLS Web. They don't feed out to any third-party sites. If you see a CSN listing on a third-party site, please report that to us so we can respond to it. CSN listings may also be shared with your existing clients and customers only. And that's an important word to remember, existing. CSN listings may not be shared as part of a broad marketing campaign to the general public. Along with that, CSN listings may only be shared with other RMLS subscribers. And that's the important word, other RMLS subscribers. If an agent is licensed to practice real estate and they are a member of another MLS but not a member of our MLS, you may not share CSN listings with them. Along with these important information are dates. There are very specific dates on how a CSN listing is marketed. And those are the list date and the date published. When we're in Listing Load on the Broker Agent Information tab, this is how we publish a listing in CSN status. We do so by checking the box next to Publish as CSN status. Next, in the Date Marketing to Begin field, we need to enter a date that is 21 days or less in the future. This is the date that public marketing can begin. This is also the date that the property will convert automatically to active status. Remembering that once a property converts to active status, it cannot be converted back to CSN status. That's an important date to remember. The date marketing to begin is the date it's automatically going to convert to active status. Next, we'll click the Publish button in order to publish this in CSN status. Once we publish this listing, that date marketing to begin becomes the list date. And the date published is the date that we press that button to publish that listing as CSN status. Next, we have Rule 3.4, which is all about office exclusive listings. Office exclusive listings has been around for a very long time and have great purpose. However, there is historically nefarious connections tied to these listings. And at RMLS, we are committed to not allowing that historic bad behavior that surrounded office exclusive listings. So when you have an office exclusive listing, your client needs to sign that form and it must be submitted to RMLS. We need to be able to track that listing. Having it on file in your office is not good enough. It needs to be submitted to RMLS within 24 hours. With an office exclusive, it is exactly that. It may only be marketed to other brokers in your same office. Now, what constitutes your office is going to vary. Some include one single location, some include multiple physical locations. If you have any questions about what constitutes your office, please talk to your principal broker. Office exclusives, very similarly to CSN listings, may only be shared with your existing, and I'm going to stress that word again, existing clients and customers only. They may not be marketed to the general public because within 1 business day of any public marketing, it must be made active in the RMLS. It will no longer qualify for CSN status because it's been publicly marketed. Which leads us nicely into Rule 3.3, which is all about clear cooperation. Clear cooperation is your National Association of Realtors definition of what exactly constitutes public marketing. And you can see a long description of the different topics that are considered public marketing, but the big important sentence on this is the very last one, and that is applications available to the general public. That is a very broad catch-all term, applications available to the general public. Once an office exclusive listing has been advertised on any application available to the general public, within 1 business day, it must be made active in the RMLS. Now that we've reviewed some of the most pertinent rules and regulations, let's talk about how we use our people and our processes and our technology to ensure our data accuracy. To start out, let's look at the rules process. With the rules process, we have 2 different ways that you can report suspected violations: via a formal violation report or an informal violation report. Let's start with the informal violation report. These are reported to RMLS either through email to data accuracy, a phone call, or using the report issue button on the agent full report. Regardless of the way you report these issues to us, once reported, it starts the investigation process and our data accuracy team will review what's being reported. If they discover there is an issue that needs to be remedied, they will reach out to the violating party and let them know that there is something that they need to pay attention to. If, however, after their investigation they discover that there is no issue identified, they'll reach back out to you, the reporting party, and let you know that there is no violation and why. In either case, we will always hold the reporting party's identity confidential. We will never disclose the identification of a reporting party in an informal violation. This is because we want to give our subscribers the ability to self-police their industry. Real estate is largely a self-policing industry. If you see something, say something. And by keeping your information confidential, we can help assure that you can report violations or suspected violations without fear of reprisal. Now that we've reviewed the informal violations, let's take a look at how the formal violation process works. Formal violations are reported using the Rules and Regulation Violation Report, where you indicate the suspected violation you're reporting and provide any sort of evidence statements as backup detailing the specific allegations. Your principal broker needs to sign this report as well, and additionally, you can request anonymity. It is not the default to request anonymity. By default, your identity can be disclosed because the accused has the right to face their accuser. However, we want to give that ability to report a violation without fear of reprisal, so you have the option of requesting anonymity. Once this is submitted to our data accuracy team, the investigation process starts. All formal violations and all violations that have a sanction associated with them are reviewed by our Rules and Regulations Committee. As mentioned before, our committees are made up of volunteer realtor subscribers. These are your peers who research what's happened, research the suspected violation, and determine the best course of action. It may simply be a warning letter. They may require additional training with an RMLS trainer such as myself. They may levy a fine. This may involve suspension from RMLS or even expulsion from RMLS. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a difference between what your association covers and RMLS covers. Certain violations are better handled through your association, such as ethical behavior, unethical behavior, commission disputes, or professional misconduct by another agent. You'll also want to go through your association for any sort of licensing issues. Now, there are certain violations that fall under the purview of both your association and RMLS. When violations are reported to us, we will advise you on the best course of action, depending on the circumstances around the violation. Now that we've reviewed the rules process, let's look how we use technology to prevent minor errors or mistakes from actually becoming violations. In Listing Load, we have a series of error messages that will pop up in red, like the one you see here. This will prevent you from being able to publish this listing until this mistake is remedied. In this case, we've indicated that this listing is subject to short sale approval and that it's bank owned. We don't want to do that because we list a property as short sale to prevent it from being bank owned. So we have this error message in place to prevent us from publishing a listing with a mistake like this. We also have pop-up alerts that are going to alert us to potential mistakes, such as, in this case, entering a sold price with more than 10% difference to the list price. That property that was listed at $400,000 may well have sold for $40,000. However, we want to assure that our data is accurate. So we're going to pop up messages like this to prevent minor mistakes from becoming inaccurate data. We also have site messages that are going to show up with green text. When it's green text, you can publish the listing without making any changes. However, this is going to alert you that there could be an error in what you filled out. In this case, we've entered our listing using a tax ID, and it's populated the owner name field with either an ampersand or the word "and." This is what generates this warning message, encouraging us that if there is a second owner name, to enter that in owner 2 field rather than in owner 1 field. We also have form alerts. As you go through the listing load process, when you get to the last form alerts tab, that needs to be 0 invalid entries in order to publish the listing. If there are any invalid entries, you will not be able to publish that listing. But we don't stop there. Once a listing is published, we have additional steps in place to prevent errors or omissions from becoming violations. And these are done through email notifications, automated emails that go out when certain conditions are met, such as choosing other in school. At RMLS, the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school are all 3 required fields because they are such a common search criteria. Because they're all required, we have to give the option of other. But we don't want to see other. We want to see the name of the school that services that property in that field. So we have 2 recommendations if you go to your list and the school that you're certain is not there. Number 1 is double check the MLS area number that you've entered. If the incorrect MLS area number is entered, the proper list of schools won't populate. The other thing to double check is that the school that your homeowner has assured you services that address is indeed a public school. Private schools will not show up in that list. If you've exhausted these possibilities and the school that you're certain services that address is still not in that list, please respond to that email and let us know why. Maybe it's that a school has changed names, or it's a brand new school that opened and we haven't been notified of it yet. Let us know so we can update our information. Another auto email notification is when a listing is published missing a tax ID. You can publish a listing without a tax ID. It's very common with new construction because the property has not been issued an ID by the county. However, we're going to send you that email notification reminding you to enter that tax ID as soon as you have it, so that we can assure that our data remains accurate, that that listing history follows the tax ID and not just a random address. The missing first photo is also going to generate a reminder that if you haven't done so, you need to upload the photo omission form. Having it on file in your office isn't good enough. It needs to be uploaded to RMLS. You can simply do so by responding to that email with the form attached. If a property is in pending status for more than 3 months, we're going to send you a gentle reminder. This may very well be the case. Maybe it's a delayed closing for whatever the case may be. However, we want to make sure that you're not in violation of that 24-hour rule and that this property, if it should have been marked as sold, gets done so as soon as possible so that the listing history remains accurate. We also have a number of fields that we are going to review both on publish and edit of a listing, such as the incorrect address. When you enter a listing into Listing Load using the tax ID, leave the property address as it feeds through. Don't put avenue, street, terrace, circle, drive, route, whatever the case may be in the street name field, leave it in the suffix field. We also are going to review a missing condo unit number. You can publish a condo listing in RMLS Web without a unit number. It's not a required field because not all condos have a unit number. They may just be the address of the home itself. It is not a unit number. However, if it should have a unit number, we want to make sure it's there because, again, we want to make sure that that listing history follows that condo unit and not the entire building or the entire development. Property condition is another one that we're going to review regularly on publish or edit of a listing. If you publish a listing as new construction, that means it is new. It's not practically new, it's not good as new, it's not like new, it's not almost new, it is brand spanking new. It's never been lived in. That's the official definition of new construction, never been lived in. We're also going to review if you mark a property as sold and it's in the property condition of proposed or under construction. We know that most lenders won't close on a property that is proposed or under construction. They will only close on a property that has received its certificate of occupancy. So we want to make sure that there's not an error there and ensure that our data remains accurate. As we mentioned before, publish or edit of a listing, we're going to watch for personal promotion. In photos, video tours, virtual tours, or the public remarks, personal promotion is not allowed to protect that brokerage relationship between the buyer's agent and their client. We're also going to review any HUD flagged verbiage, and let's look at this rule specifically. This is Rule 3.23 about fair housing and RMLS's commitment to upholding and enforcing fair housing laws. Fair housing as determined by both the federal, state, and local governments. We have a list of words in our database that is going to pop up for our data accuracy staff to review what's being said and make sure that we are in compliance with fair housing laws and not allowing discriminatory language. For example, you can describe the adorable white picket fence that surrounds this property. However, our staff is going to review that you're describing that adorable fence and not saying something awful. You can describe in detail the gleaming black granite countertops in the kitchen, but we are going to review what's being said there to make sure you're describing that amazing kitchen and not saying something awful. There is also a list of words that will never be allowed in RMLS Web, and these will give you red alerts in Listing Load telling you that this is a HUD flagged word that will not be allowed, and you will not be able to publish that listing until that word is removed. These are all words that are blatantly discriminatory in their use. Now that we've talked about the technology that we have in place, we want to review how we use people to ensure our data accuracy. We've talked at length of how our data accuracy team ensures this, but even more important is our subscribers. As I mentioned earlier, real estate is a self-policing industry. If you see something, say something. I've shown you the methods that you can use to report suspected violations, either the formal violation or the informal violation, depending on the severity of the case. But keep your industry open and honest. Don't let an agent who's behaving badly give the industry a bad name. Now, we're about to start our tour of RMLS Web, but before we do, there are some important terms that we want to discuss, such as the residential property types. There are a variety of different residential property types that you can list a property as well as search by, and we want to make sure that you're clear on what each of these property types are. And to start out, we're going to look specifically at the attached properties and the detached property type and how these two are similar, but also their key differences. Both of these property types include land in this transaction. However, the big difference between them is attached properties share at least one common element with another property. It could be a wall, it could be a ceiling, it could be two walls, it could be a ceiling and a wall, whatever the case may be, it shares at least one common element with another property. Detached properties, on the other hand, are standalone residents. They have no common elements. They're surrounded by yard. It may be tiny yard, it may be only 6 inches of yard, but it is surrounded by yard. The big mistake we see with these two property types is the relation they have to the garage, and that is nothing. It doesn't matter if the garage is attached to the home, attached by a carport, separated by 15 feet, in the back 40, or if there is no garage whatsoever. It doesn't matter. Neither of these property types have anything to do with the garage, only with the proximity to another property. Next, let's take a look at condominiums. With the condominium purchase, you are purchasing the interior of the space only. There is no land included in this transaction. And as such, there will be shared common areas such as hallways, elevators, lobbies, or maybe yard or outdoor space. They may also include additional deeded spaces such as parking spaces, storage facilities, patios, or maybe even yards. But the important thing to remember is there is no land included in this transaction. Next, after condos, we have our cooperative housing. These aren't very common in Oregon. In fact, there's only one in the entire state, and it's found in Northwest Portland. It's the Park Vista Co-op Association. With cooperative housing, you are buying ownership of a stock certificate. Ownership of this certificate allows occupancy of a specific unit. Again, there is no land included in this transaction. Next, we have my favorite, and that is a floating home. The official definition of a floating home at RMLS is a flat-bottom boat designed to be a residence. But this may also include a floating platform and a residence built on top. It may be a stick-built structure, it may be a modular structure, it may be a manufactured home, but it is floating on a platform. Floating homes may also include land in the transaction, but not many do. Next, we're going to include two more that are very similar to each other, and that is our in-park and our manufactured home on real property. What these two property types have in common is that both of these include the purchase of a manufactured home in the transaction. The difference between them being that manufactured home on real property also includes land in this transaction. You are buying the land and the personal property. In park, you are only buying the manufactured home, and it is more than likely on a leased lot. Next, we have our partial ownership properties. With partial ownership properties, these are most commonly seen on the coast, in the mountains, or at other sort of resort-style communities. With partial ownerships, this may include land. It may include the interior space of a structure only. It may also include scheduled use. But what it will always include is divided, deeded ownership. Next, and not very commonly seen, is our planned community. Planned communities are typically vacant land that's going to be subdivided, that has a mixed use zoning, such as residential, recreational, and commercial. Now that we've talked about the residential property types, let's look at the different property status types that you'll see a listing go through in its life cycle. And we're going to start out by looking at the status types that have an in-force listing agreement. This means there is an in-force contract between a listing agent and the property seller. The real estate industry loves its abbreviations and acronyms, and we see the list of them here, but let's look at them in their full glory, starting out with coming soon, no showing listings. We're already familiar with this one. It is coming soon, no showings. It is only being marketed to other RMLS subscribers. Next, and also familiar by now, are active listings. Active listings are actively being marketed on the RMLS as well as to the general public. Next, we have our pending status listings. This means that this property has an accepted offer and it's assumed that it's going to close. Very similarly, our bumpable pending. This is also an accepted offer on a property. However, the buyer of that property is contingent on selling another property in order to close on this one. If another offer comes in that is not contingent on another sale, it can bump this one off the table. And then we have short sale pending. Short sale pending also means there's an accepted offer on this property. However, the price on that offer is less than the recorded mortgage and is subject to approval by the lender in order to close. And finally, we have our pending lease option. This also means that there is an accepted offer on this property. However, there is a lease associated with that. The buyer is going to lease the property for a specified amount of time, and potentially part of that lease may be going towards the purchase price. Each of these is handled differently. And finally, we have our withdrawn status. Remembering that we are in the category of status types that have an in-force listing agreement. Withdrawn properties have an in-force listing agreement. However, they've been withdrawn from active listing on the RMLS and from the general public, but there is still an in-force listing agreement. So how do these different property types affect their availability for showing? Well, we're already familiar with the first two, but we're going to reiterate them anyway. Coming soon, no showing listings may not be shown by anyone at any time for any reason. Active listings must be available immediately upon publishing unless the uncooperative tenant unavailable for showing forms has been submitted. All the rest of these, pending, bumpable, all these pending statuses, withdrawn status, may be shown with the listing agent's approval and with the express approval of the owner. The important one to remember with this is pending status. If you are the buyer's agent and your offer has been accepted and this property is now in pending status, that does not give you carte blanche to enter this property whenever you want. You still need to get approval from the listing agent in order to enter this property. Now let's talk about the property statuses that have no in-force listing agreement. We're going to start out with the very first one, and that is expired listings. The listing agreement that did exist came to the end of its term and expired. There is no in-force listing agreement. Canceled listings were canceled prior to that expiration date for whatever reason. Sold means that the listing agreement fulfilled the terms of the agreement and the property has now changed hands. Sold not listed were never listed on the MLS. However, an agent entered in the sold records for historic data purposes. And then finally, we have leased, which affects our commercial listings where a lease has been signed on a space. So how do these affect availability for showing? Well, just like the end of our previous list, all of these may be shown with express approval of the owner. None of these have to be shown, and none of these can't be shown. They all may be shown. Another way we protect the agency relationship between a buyer's agent and their client is the different property reports that we have available on RMLS Web. In any search results, when we click on the Select Report menu, we will see our agent-facing reports and our client-facing reports. We've separated these out for you because the agent-facing reports are going to have information that you may not want to share with your clients at this point, such as the listing agent's information, the showing instructions and codes, potentially lockbox codes or alarm codes. It will have the buyer agent commission disclosed, other private disclosures, as well as any branded web links or marketing materials. To protect you from accidentally sending this confidential information to your clients, we have disabled the email function for these reports. And finally, before we log into RMLS Web, we want to discuss one final rule, and that is 9.2, the no disclosure of password rule. As a subscriber at RMLS, your password is for your personal and exclusive use only. Don't give your login to your friend, to your spouse, to your aunt who just loves to look at listings. There are plenty of other spaces for them to look at listings, including our favorite HomeSnap, which is the public portal to RMLS Web. Your access to RMLS gives you access to private, confidential, sensitive information. Don't allow the public access to that information. It is a violation that can earn a fine of up to $15,000. Now, let's log in for our tour of RMLS Web. RMLS has been designed so that everything you need on a daily basis is found right at the top of the homepage. Before we get into these most frequently used features, let's continue the tour to other aspects that you'll want to be familiar with. The top of the homepage is our announcement section, and any urgent announcements will be posted here. Scrolling down the page, we find the newsletter. This section is updated weekly by our communications team with information specific to RMLS, as well as industry news and information. At RMLS, we never delete anything. If you've once found an article on the newsletter that you wanted to come back to but don't see it, not to worry. Everything gets archived, and we can find these past articles by clicking on the More Stories button. After the newsletter section, we'll see the RMLS inventory statistics that are updated daily and include the current number of active listings in the system and the total dollar value of those listings. We also have the total of all listings sold in RMLS over the last 12 months and the dollar amount of those listings. And finally, the total number of listings that have ever been entered into RMLS. At the very bottom are useful links to things such as the latest market action report, the RMLS blog, or the rules and regulations document. I'll also show you another way to access that document as well. To the right are other industry links. Back to the top, we're going to continue the tour with the menu bar. Starting from the very right, where we have access to live chat support Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, closed at lunch, and is staffed by a team of trainers. Just above that, we have our Contact Us button. This is where you can find the phone number to our help desk if you need more technical support or maybe more urgent help. This also has the contact information for other departments and other offices. At the very top, we have the questions, comments, and feedback link. This is one of the ways that you can report an informal violation by sending a message to data accuracy. This is also how you can make an enhancement request. As I mentioned earlier, RMLS is a website that we built and have control over, and we want to hear from our subscribers. Submitting an enhancement request is great for non-urgent requests. I wish RMLS did this. Does RMLS do this? Could RMLS ever? Our enhancement committee meets monthly and literally reads through every enhancement we get to determine how we can best respond to it. If it's a change that's under our purview to make, we'll do so. Sometimes it's a feature or use that's already available and a trainer will reach out to help. Other times, requests need to be submitted to the board of directors to vote on. Moving on to the drop-down menus, the Help menu also has another access point to the Contact Us page. This is also where you can find the training and support resources, which includes training tutorials on a variety of RMLS topics, such as boundary search, listing load, managing listings, entering CSN status, how to do a comparative market analysis, and so on and so forth. At the top of the page, we also have the links to the support sites for our third-party partners. Back to the Help tab is also where you can go to register for additional classes with RMLS, including scheduling a virtual one-on-one with a trainer to go over whatever topic you want. The great thing about these virtual one-on-ones is oftentimes we'll have you share your screen and walk you through the steps. These are also unlimited. You have no cap on the amount of support you can receive from RMLS. There are also a number of classes we have at RMLS, and this is where you can go for more information or to register for any of the classes that we offer, including the deep dive into RMLS web search, listing load overview, the CMA overview, and so on. Next, on the Help tab, over to the left is the Subscriber Account Information tab. This is the billing site, and while we include the link on the invoice itself to pay your dues, if you've somehow lost that link or need to reference a previously paid invoice, you can find them here.
You can also call us and we can provide them for you. Skipping down a little bit is an option that you'll only see if you're licensed in both Oregon and Washington, and that is the Switch License button. This lets you easily toggle between your logins rather than having to log in and out each time. But above that is our user preferences. This is an important tab to visit, especially for new subscribers. You'll also want to come back here periodically to review or make any changes to your information. RMLS utilizes tabs in our modules such as you see here. In any module that has tabs like this, if we make changes on this page, it will automatically save those changes when we click inside another tab. But we also have the option of using the Save button if we don't trust autosave. The first tab is our information that appears on the RMLS web roster. This is the information that other agents will see about you, including any specialties you want to include. As you go through your real estate career and attain different designations, you'll want to be sure to include those here. As well as if you are fluent in a language other than English and want to be sure that an agent that is looking to refer a client that may be better represented in their native tongue can find you. The main thing to note on the desktop sidebar options is that this box is checked by default. Unabbreviated listing load is the default setting, but if you prefer the abbreviated form, or if you log in and discover that your listing load is in the abbreviated version for whatever reason, this is where you can make that change. The Report Options tab is where things start to get a bit more interesting, starting with the ability to choose which agent full report is our default. A few years ago, we updated the agent full report and many longtime agents just couldn't get comfortable with it. So we've given this option of choosing to use the updated version, which is the current default, or reverting to the older abbreviated report. This is also where you can make changes to the banner that is displayed when you send property reports to clients, including adding our preferred real estate partners to keep them front and center with our clients. I've got my preferred lender, my company's transaction management portal, some useful home tools, whatever links you want to include in your banner can be entered here. And at the very bottom, we'll see a preview of what that banner looks like. Moving on to the email signature tab is where we can add text that can be included as an email signature when reports are sent using RMLS Web Email. Note that this is a text-only field. Our next tab is a big tab. There's a lot to do on this tab. There's one thing we can do on this tab, but it's an important thing to do. When we set up a prospecting profile, which I'll demonstrate in just a little bit, we have the option of sending a copy of the email to ourselves. If we want, we can also check this box, and we'll receive an email notification that there are new matches to a profile that will need to come into RMLS Web to view. The next tab is where we can upload a photo that appears on the report banner as well as use on the RMLS Web CMA report. We can also add a resume that will become available on the CMA reports. If we're a part of a team, we can upload that photo here, again making it available as an option when sending CMA reports. And finally, on the Company Information tab is where we can add additional material that we want to make available when sending CMAs through RMLS Web. I skipped past the company email logo on purpose because only the head broker can make changes to that information. Let's continue our tour of the toolbar and take a look at the Back Office tab. Here you can see that we can create a slideshow of listing based on our company's listings, my listings, or listings that we've checked in a search results. This can be useful to have playing at an open house or on your office's display. Over on the left, we'll see a red balloon if there are any violations reported by us or against us that need attention. In the middle is one of those places that we can access listing load, but even easier access to that is right back on the home page. What I want to make sure to show you here is this is where we can go to submit an excluded listing, otherwise known as an office exclusive. Like I mentioned earlier in our rules and regulation overview, this is where you come to upload that PDF within 1 business day of your client signing. Under back office is also where we can enter in a new construction information record. This is a super useful tool for agents that work with new construction sales. There is a great video tutorial back here in the training and support resources that details how to enter in this new construction information record. Moving along to the Toolkit tab, this contains a ton of useful information and products, starting with this long list of third-party links. We have a great 1 hour long class that provides an overview of all of these products. Many of these also have a full hour-long class just on that product itself, such as HomeSnap or RPR or Remind. If you want to explore what these are a bit more on your own, click on More and you'll be able to see a brief description of each tool and what it does. Over in the middle of the toolkit is another place where we can access the training and support resources to find those training tutorials. We can also search the newsletter archive, but more specifically, I want to show you where you can find all documents. As I mentioned earlier, we don't throw anything away at RMLS. Everything is archived and can be found here, including the rules and regulations document. I do suggest that if you are searching for a specific document, to uncheck the box next to news. Otherwise, you'll get results that include newsletter articles. So if I want to access the rules and regulations document, I can do so at the bottom of the homepage or here under all documents. Either way will work. As I mentioned, this is a lengthy document, and with any lengthy document, Control F is your friend. Simply hold down the Control and F keys on your keyboard and you'll see this pop up here. Now we just enter in whatever it is we're looking for, such as CSN, and it will show us how many times it appears in the document, as well as highlight each occurrence and make it easy to navigate by using the arrows. The rules and regulation violation report that we talked about earlier can also be found here under all documents, as well as the photograph omission form, and even the authorization to exclude or office exclusive form. Any RMLS form can be found here. However, this is not where you want to come to look for contract addendums or disclosures. Those are provided to you through OREF and can be accessed via SkySlope or zip forms. Over on the left side of the toolkit menu are two more features that you'll want to be aware of. The first one being the Contact Manager. This is very useful if you need to look back and resend any property reports that were previously sent to a client using RMLS Web email. Just below that is a link to the RPR flyer. This lets you create a nice one-page flyer by simply entering in an MLS number. This can be very useful if you're hosting an open house and don't want to do a bunch of graphic design. This will create it for you based on the listing information. Moving along to the Roster and Association tab, this is where we find the links to the websites for all the realtor associations that are members of RMLS. You can also search the RMLS roster here, but I'm going to show you an easier way to do that on the quick search bar. Moving right along into the Statistics tab, I'm only going to click on one thing here because we have an entire 1 hour class that goes in depth as to the information that you have access to here, including how to get very customized specific statistics to use in working with your clients. I want to quickly show you the latest market action report, which is generated by the 15th of each month and is included in our monthly newsletter. The market action reports are separated by region and provide preset statistics about that region, such as change in new listings, pending, and closed sales over the past 2 months, as well as year-to-date summaries and comparison of average and median sales prices compared to last year. We'll also have the inventory in months over the past 3 years. Inventory in months means that if no new listings were entered into the system and the rate of sales continues at its current trajectory, how long until there would be 0 listings? This is an indication of whether it's a buyer's market or a seller's market. Below that, we have a number of charts and graphical representations of this data, all of which you are welcome to share with your clients or in your marketing materials. We just have one requirement, and that is to cite your source. Don't be a copyright infringer. Again, we have a fantastic class that delves deeply into these statistical tools. However, we're going to move on to our prospecting tab. But we're going to save prospecting profiles for a little bit longer yet, since that is so much easier access right on the home page rather than a drop-down menu. But here is where we can find our watch list and perform a reverse prospecting search. In the watch list, we can watch up to 200 properties via an MLS number or a tax ID. And depending on how we've enabled the notifications, be notified of any RMLS activity in relation to that MLS number or tax ID. Adding a property to our watch list is done either from the agent full report or the tax report by clicking on Add to Watch List. And if we want, include some notes as to why we're watching it. One thing to note with the watch list is that if you watch a property based on its MLS number, once that property is sold, we will never see anything more about it. If we watch it based on the tax ID, we'll be notified of any RMLS activity in relation to that tax ID. Reverse prospecting has a couple of uses. Mainly, it lets us enter in basic criteria and see how many other subscribers have a prospecting profile that matches this criteria. This can be useful in determining interest in an area for a property that we're about to list, or maybe for an active listing that isn't getting a lot of showings, and be able to reach out to those agents and find out why, despite our listing matching, they haven't shown it. Now on to the search tab. Even though there is a lot on this tab, we're going to spend a surprisingly little amount of time here because almost all of this can be done right on the home page, except for setting up a hot sheet profile. Searching expired listings can be done using this search tool, but can also be done using the advanced search tool, which is found on the home screen. Hot Sheets lets you set up an area that you want to be aware of any RMLS activity in. However, it will not email you of any notifications of that activity. You need to rely on the red balloon in the search button to be notified of new activity. I'm going to show you a little shortcut of how to use prospecting profiles and auto email to do that. The search menu is also where we can go to search for public open houses or broker tours. We've hinted at it, and now we're actually going to get to it. The homepage of RMLS Web. As I mentioned at the very beginning, everything you need to use on a daily basis in relation to RMLS Web is found right here. And let's start with the quick search bar. The quick search bar has 3 categories: listings, tax, and roster. The roster can be used for searching other RMLS subscribers via email, phone number, last name, first name, or even part of their name. This is useful when you need to find out information such as what office that agent's in, what their buyer ID is, or maybe even who their principal broker is. The tax tab lets us search by a tax ID if we include the number symbol, hashtag symbol, pound symbol, whatever you call that symbol depending on your generation, including that as telling our system to search the tax ID field for this information. We can also use the tax ID field by using the equal symbol to search by owner name. Just like the roster, we can search by last name, first name, both, or we can simply search by an address. Throughout RMLS Web, right-clicking on a tax ID or a listing ID allows us to open it in a new window. This can make it easier to reference this information later on. Notice here on the tax report where we can add this property to our watch list. The listing tab of the quick search bar makes it easy to search for MLS information by a specific address. or we can search by an MLS number or numbers if we include a comma. The quick search bar can even be used to search a range of addresses by including 2 periods between the house numbers. This will bring up all the MLS activity for these couple blocks on this street. This can be useful when we know there is a listing somewhere on the street, but we're unsure of the exact address. It's also a great snapshot of the listing history of these couple blocks. If you ever need a reminder of how to use the quick search bar, clicking on Help will expand the field, showing the different ways that each of these tabs can be searched. And now we come to our action buttons. These are the tools that are the bread and butter of a realtor's day. There are 5 buttons here, but really we only need these 3: prospecting profiles, listing load, and CMA. While map search and advanced search are great search tools, the ability to do a map search exists within advanced search. And advanced search is easily accessed through prospecting profiles. And prospecting profiles is what allows us to not only save searches, but assign them to a client and even set up auto email. So let's start there in prospecting profiles. But before we do, let's take a look at that advanced search so you can understand what I mean. In any RMLS web search, we want to start by clicking clear. This assures that we don't accidentally have any leftover criteria from a previous search that may skew our current search. So for now, just notice what this page looks like, and let's go back to the home page and start in prospecting profiles. We'll come back to the prospecting profile homepage and explain what all this means at the end when it will make more sense. To start, we'll select Add New Prospecting Profile. And of course, click Clear. This looks familiar, doesn't it? We are now in the Advanced Search tool. Now, Advanced Search is nothing to be intimidated by. It can be a super basic search. At RMLS, we have a rhyme, and that is, if it's blue, you must do. Notice that there is not many blue or required fields on this page. An advanced search can be as simple as simply choosing the property category, status, and some sort of geographic boundary, whether it's by MLS area or map range. What's wonderful and powerful about advanced search is that it gives us the ability to search all the fields available in listing load. And you can see here under the additional criteria, the options we have when needing to find that needle in a haystack of a property. We have an additional class that I mentioned a little bit ago called Deep Dive into RMLS Web Searching that will show you wonderful ways of using this criteria, as well as navigating and customizing the search results. This orientation class is just to get you started in the basics, so we're going to keep our search simple. Residential, active, bumpable, and short sale pending are the defaults, so let's add a few of the most frequently used criteria, starting with price. This is the only criteria that requires a minimum and a maximum. We can add property type. This should look familiar from earlier on our class. Moving on to bedrooms. Unlike price, with bedrooms, we don't need a minimum and a maximum. We can choose one or the other. We can search for up to 4 bedrooms or a minimum of 2 bedrooms. We could even search for a range specifically between 3 and 4 bedrooms. Similarly to that with bathrooms, we don't need to include a minimum and a maximum. The important thing to remember with bathrooms is that the period is not a decimal point, but rather a divider of data. If we want a 1.5 bath home, or rather 1 full and 1 partial bath, we need to enter 1.1. If we were to make the mistake of thinking that this dot is a decimal point and we entered 1.5, We're now searching for 1 full and 5 partial bathrooms. So we'll keep ours to 1 full and 1 partial. And we're going to leave our criteria at that. Notice how the criteria that we've entered has populated the list to the right. We can always come back and change these criteria, remove criteria, or add even more. One word of advice when searching RMLS Web is to keep your criteria to a minimum to start. This is not a Google search that's going to return our results as well as similar that we may be interested in. What we ask for is exactly what we're going to get. I also recommend taking the listing load class. Even if you don't have any potential listings yet, that class will demonstrate the required fields in listing load, which can make your knowledge of reliable fields to search by stronger. The reason understanding required fields can be important is if a listing agent doesn't fill out a non-required field and you make that part of your search criteria, you won't see their listing despite the fact that the home actually may have that feature. A great example of that is fireplace. Fireplace is not a required field in listing load. If the listing agent was lazy or just forgot to check the box that the house has a fireplace, even though it does, and we make that part of our criteria, we may be missing out on what could be our client's dream home. Another tip for searching RMLS is when your client gives you their list of wants and needs, ask them why. Why do you need 7 bedrooms? Why do you need to be close to the river? Understanding the why of the wants can lead to the wow, you found me my dream home. We do have additional frequently used criteria that lets us search by city, zip code, or even using the MLS area number. However, I'm going to suggest to you to use the map range in setting any sort of geographic boundary. As I mentioned, the deep dive into RMLS web searching goes much deeper into using the map search than we have time for here today, and I highly recommend that class. To use the map range field, we simply check the box to open the map. Then use the locate field to navigate to our general search area. Then we'll use any of the drawing tools to define our geographic search area. The benefit of using the map over the area number or the criteria is that it relies on the property's location, not what was entered or perhaps misentered by a listing agent. In the draw tool, we have great options for drawing, including boundary and drive time search. But again, we're going to keep it simple to start out, and we're going to draw a polygon because our clients told us that they want to be south of this, east of this, north of this, and don't you dare show me anything east of this. We simply click the mouse each time we want to change direction, then click back inside the starting box to complete the shape. Now that we have our geographic area selected, we're ready to click count. This is always a good idea before running search, as it will give us a nice preview of our search results represented by the blue dots. Anything in gray are listings that match our criteria but fall outside of the shape that we've drawn. We may decide that we need to adjust our criteria, our shape, or even draw more than one shape to capture some of these matches. Now we can run the search. If we simply want to send everything in the results to our clients, we can click the green Select Report button and it will select all for us. Then we simply choose the client-facing report that we want to send. Then we can either save it as a PDF to send through our own email, print it and physically deliver it to the client. And one note here, some computers don't like our PDF generator. If you find yourself getting an error message when trying to create a PDF of a report, remembering that you can use the print button to create a PDF rather than printing it physically. Or we can send the report via RMLS Web email. If we don't want to send all the results to the client, we need to check the box next to the specific ones we want to send before selecting the Select Report button. There is a huge amount of customization and options available for you in this list view, all of which are gone into great detail in the deep dive class. Now that we've sent this initial batch of listings to our client, we still want to save the search for our client. And we do this by selecting Revise Search, then Save As. Because I'm setting this up for a client, I'm going to start the name as Client. Next, we can assign it to a client already existing in our Contact Manager or add a new one. We only need a name here. However, if we do want to set up the auto email, we'll check the box and need to include some sort of email address. Now we can choose how often our clients will be notified. By default, the system will run the search every 15 minutes, and if any new matches from this point forward show up in the system, either as a new listing, an existing listing that's had a change made to it that makes it now match our criteria, they'll be automatically sent to our client. If we want to be sent a copy, we can check the box. If we don't, we'll need to rely on the red balloon up in the prospecting button. Or if we check the box in our user preferences earlier, an email letting us know that there are new matches to review. Once we click Save, we are all set. We've already sent the existing matches to the client, and now any new matches from this point forward will automatically be sent because we set up auto email. Now on the Prospecting Profile homepage, anytime there's a new match, we'll see the word New, and we can click on that to see new matches. Noting that if there was a new match at some point, but has since changed to no longer be a match, we might not see that one or anything here. Also notice that after clicking New and reviewing the results, it still shows New. Once we've reviewed the results, we need to clear the matches by checking the box and clicking on Clear Prospect Matches. Now on the prospecting homepage, we can also run the full search. We can also edit the criteria, rename the search, or edit our contacts information. We also want to be sure to either delete or disable the search once we found them their dream home to prevent them from unsubscribing accidentally from RMLS Web email. I mentioned my hot sheet shortcut earlier, so notice how I've used my prospecting profiles. Prospecting profiles are automatically arranged alphabetically by profile name. So for the areas that I've set up to watch for myself, I've named them Agent. And you can see there is no contact associated with them. Anything that's assigned to a client, I've named the search Client and then the name of the search. This is of course not how you have to use it, but just a tip of how you could use prospecting profiles to keep your work all in one place. CMA and listing load. After you take the deep dive class, these are two more absolutely vital classes that I recommend. And remember, if group classes are not where you thrive, where you learn best, you have an unlimited source of one-on-ones that you can schedule with the trainer to go over any of these topics. Our tour of RMLS Web has been a whirlwind tour, and I hope I've pointed you in the direction to get you started. It's now time to move on to the basics of SentryLock.
And primarily, we're going to look at the SentryKey RE app, or the SentryKey Real Estate app. This is how subscribers can gain access to these lockbox devices using any Bluetooth device. However, there's another app for you to be aware of, and that is the Sentry Connect app. This is not an app that you need to download or even have a subscription to. However, we do recommend referring this to the non-subscribers that you're going to grant Sentry Connect access to as the owner of the lockbox. But of course, we're here to focus on SentryKey RE. But first, we want to talk about where you can get lockboxes. As we mentioned earlier, talking about our locations, at any of our 11 locations, you can purchase both new or used lockboxes. New are 125, used are 95, and at any of these locations, you can receive help and support with using these lockboxes or the app. As a showing agent, you have easy access to opening these lockboxes. You simply have your app open, approach the lockbox, and press enter on the keypad. That will give you access to the lockbox as well as any showing instructions that the listing agent has entered. Now, there are some important things to remember about these lockboxes. These lockboxes work solely on Bluetooth technology. They have no web capability to them whatsoever. So we do recommend that if you know you're going to be in an area with limited cellular coverage, open up the app before you leave that cellular coverage area to ensure that you refresh the list of available lockboxes. If you don't do so, you may not be able to access this lockbox. So make sure that before you go on tour for the day, that you open up your Sentry Connect app and refresh the list of available lockboxes. Now, as a showing agent, there are some important rules to be aware of. Starting out with Rule 3.22, which details the use of the RMLS lockbox system, and specifically that under any circumstances, these lockbox access devices may not be used by anyone other than the system user. As a realtor, you can't give your phone to someone else and let them open these lockboxes. As a showing agent, you cannot generate a code for these lockboxes. Only the listing broker may generate a code or grant Sentry Connect access to a lockbox. As a showing agent, your only availability is to open that lockbox yourself. Rule 7.1 goes into more details about the showing procedures, and that is these lockboxes devices are only to be opened in accordance with the showing instructions. If you need to schedule an appointment, make sure you schedule that appointment. If that appointment needs to be approved by the listing agent or by the homeowner, you need to wait until that appointment is approved, unless with express permission of the listing broker or owner. That is the only exception. And it's important to follow these rules because Rule 5.1 talks about the sanctions. And misuse of a lockbox device can earn a sanction of up to $15,000. That's a lot of money. It can also include suspension or expulsion from the RMLS. So make sure that you are opening these lockboxes only in accordance with the showing instructions or with the express approval of the listing agent or the homeowner. From a listing agent point of view, there's a lot more that you can do with these lockboxes using your Bluetooth device and the app. For example, you can very easily release the shackle in order to physically attach this lockbox to a property. Once you've released the shackle and attached it to a property, you can assign it to an active listing, you can assign it simply to an address, or you can leave it unassigned. The other great thing about these lockboxes is you can easily assign these or unassign them to a property. By clicking the Assign to Property, you can do so remotely. You don't have to be physically present. You can assign it to an active listing, to simply an address, and again, you don't have to be physically present to do so. You can also, as the listing agent, grant Sentry Connect access. Sentry Connect access is the most secure method for granting access to non-subscribers because it is revocable, it is non-transferable, and it requires registration. When you grant Sentry Connect access, you need to send it to an email address. That email address will either invite that person to create their Sentry Connect account, or if they're already a Sentry Connect user, inform that they have been granted Sentry Connect access. This access can be granted for as short as an hour and as long as 2 weeks, but it is always revocable. You also have the ability to grant different kinds of codes, such as the one-day code, or even activate the contractor mode on the lockbox. To activate contractor mode, you do need to be physically present to the lockbox in order to do so. However, these are two of the least secure methods because when you grant one of these codes, all you're going to see in your access log is that this code was used, not who used it. As a listing agent, you can also easily adjust the access settings, the property access settings. You can include alarm codes, you can enable homeowner notification, all of this not present to the lockbox. You don't have to be physically present. For additional security, you also have the option of activating the call before showing code. This grants an additional layer of security to these lockboxes. Any subscriber to the SentryLock service, in order to open this lockbox, will need to enter an additional code that you will provide to them. That is our basic review of SentryLock. If you have more questions about how to use this device, we have a wonderful half-hour-long class that will show you the details of how to use this device and a little bit more on the rules surrounding them. We also, of course, have many additional training webinars, such as scheduling a one-on-one, listing load, SentryLock Essentials, CMA Overview, RMLS statistics, searching and prospecting, navigating, third-party tools, CMA options, HomeSnap, Showing Time, Remind, RPR, lots of additional training opportunities at RMLS. I also showed you on RMLS Web Tour where to watch our additional training tutorials. I hope you enjoyed this orientation. I hope you learned a lot. Congratulations and welcome to your new career.